Norfolk Advisory Committee to order. Ooh. Can we fix that?
Speakers on
Volume
TV.
on TV.
Yeah, it's a TV volume.
Or is it the computer?
No, computer.
The remote's up there.
It's coming from there.
Definitely in this one. Yeah, is that the remote?
No, I think the remotes are back there.
That seemed to do it. Nope.
Now at bat, number 23.
Derek Jeter. I'm sorry, it just sounds better that way. It sounds so much better. We all set? We are all set. Thank you, folks. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First order of business is to take attendance. Rob Garrity.
Here.
Brian Beachkowski.
Yep.
Jonathan Hurwitz.
Here.
Ken Fitzgerald.
Here.
Mike G.
Here.
David Lutz here. Tonight, we're going to hear from the planning board. The chairman, Chad Peck, is with us, and then we'll hear from Justin on the various related warrant articles that are his responsibility. Miriam, for the purposes of getting attendance, can you identify yourself, last name, if you don't mind? I didn't hear you, sorry.
Oh, probably because we,
We muted her.
The volume
Are we going to
down?
be able to hear Chad?
You should be able to.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
okay.
If you could identify yourself, Miriam, that'd be great.
You can send it in the chat, too.
You can send it. You can send a chat, and we'll do it.
It's something.
Thank you. Chad, if you could go first and walk through the 4 warrant articles that you have. I understand one of them has a public hearing scheduled, and it will require someone to return after that hearing to tell us how that went and stuff like that. But the 4 are on our list, 18, 19, 20, and 21. And the first one is raising the spending limit for the performance bond defaults. If you could walk us through what that is.
So which article is that?
It's,
I only have 3 articles.
oh,
I have 18, 19, and 20.
21 is amend section 310, 6.5 to add dimensional space permit, special permit for accessory buildings.
Okay, so yours must be a little different than mine. They must have got renumbered then. That's my article 20.
Are they, is Article 20?
Just a quick question.
Just ask Chad what he has.
Okay, yeah.
Go through those.
So I just want to make sure we're talking about, I mean, there was some discussion of combining 2 articles. Is the special permit, dimensional special permit requirement part of a larger article than it was before, or are they still split in your mind?
The dimensional article, that was, we pulled that. We're not doing that. So I have Article 18, which is Section 310, 6.7G for the parking spaces.
Yep.
Okay, so we had so I have that. Then I have Article 19, which is Section 310-6.4.
Yep.
And then I have Article 20, which is Section 310-6.5, accessory buildings and swimming pools. And that's all I have.
So there's nothing for,
So you're not intending for an article that we have listed to raise the spending limit for performance bonds?
I
Sounds like
don't
it's
have that.
miscategorized. That doesn't sound like a
yeah,
planning
that's not
board
what the
item.
article is.
That wouldn't be coming from the planning board, my understanding, no.
And that's not what's shown here for
It's
18
about
either.
Shire
anyway.
Industrial Park.
Yeah.
Raise or appropriate, raise appropriate.
Oh, it's a road,
transfer
it's a road.
$272,000 for the completion of the roadway and other subdivision elements of Shire.
To be expended under the direction of the planning board.
I got you. So, yeah, okay. That wasn't an article that I have in front of me. I mean,
Okay.
I know we had talked about doing that for Shire Drive, but That's news to me.
So
That was there.
Rich must have proposed that then, right? Rich?
I would have this one discussed for Rich when you
Okay,
have the plan
all
come
right,
back.
great.
Yeah, I need to circle back with you on that. Because I'm not sure if that came from the planning board or who presented that. I mean, I am familiar with that, but wasn't.
Why don't we talk to Rich and,
Yeah,
because I think,
I said we table that and let me dive into that a little bit more and get back to you on that.
I think you guys are going to have to take a position because it has you as having control over the spending of the funds. So you guys are going to have to be comfortable with that if it's going to go forward, so.
I totally understand. So it may have gotten, someone else may have presented that, but it's going to fall into the direction of the planning board.
All right.
So, yeah, I'm not in the loop on that, but I can get up to speed on that quickly. I'll circle back with you.
Okay. So why don't we start with the parking lot one, which many of
So
us
the
are familiar with, so.
Yeah, so the parking spaces, so do you have that as Article 19? Is that what you have it
Yep.
as? Okay. All right, so the parking spaces is one. So we did have the public hearing on that two months ago. That has been closed. There was no comments on that. Just to give you an update, so that was, public hearing was open, closed, no comments. This is, as the town planner comments state, this was really a drafting error when the whole E-code was created. So now that E-code's been adopted, we went back and looked at this, and actually town council was one that said, hey, we need to clean up this language. This should have been cleaned up with E-code. It wasn't. We need to go back and clean it up now. And so that's what we're proposing.
So this is different than what we talked about in the spring, which was an amendment to the previous new rules for the outdoor recreation parking, correct? This is
That's right.
this is essentially just a renumbering.
Yeah, that's right. This is to clean up the language and provide clarity, because town council recommended that this should have been done with E-code. It wasn't, and it needs to be cleaned up now.
Does anyone have any questions?
This is cleaning up the language in a bylaw.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Yeah.
Article 20, which is Article 19 on your thing, which is.
Yes, so Article 20 and then 21 that
Right.
you have, we opened the public hearing last, I guess it would have been 2 weeks ago. We had that public hearing. We have not closed it. We are going to close that next month. So in 2 weeks, we'll close that. So there is this section 310.6.4, non-conforming structures. We are changing the language on that to allow for structures that do violate, but don't violate to a greater extent, and making that by right, which is a change. If you look at the old number 2, alteration, enlargement, blah, 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 but if it does not violate the requirements or is greater to the extent, it needs to go to the ZBA for a special permit. So what we're saying now is, if it does violate or doesn't violate to a greater extent, it still can, and it's an existing structure, you can do it by right. And this was a combination of Bob Bullock coming to us and the ZBA and saying, look, this is becoming a common occurrence for these special permits, and as long as they're not violating this greater, we're typically allowing it. So we need to clean up the language to basically to say what we're actually doing. So that's the first part of this. And then it kind of, I mean, the whole premise is the same, down further under section B, same thing with the demolition and reconstruction. So we're saying, hey, you can demolish and reconstruct a non-conforming structure as long as it doesn't violate it as long as it's not greater. And you can do that by right without a special permit.
But with a limitation of 500 square feet
Yeah, so then
Addition.
under B.2, yeah, then there is this special 500-foot that you would have to,
That's a cap on an expansion, essentially.
exactly.
Okay.
So, yep.
Does anyone have any questions? No? And can you give me a sense, Chad, of what the sort of annual flow did Bob give you a sense of that, or the ZBA, did you talk to the ZBA about what they're seeing for?
No, they did not. They just said it is a common occurrence that they typically allow it if it's the same or less. If it's not a greater extent, if it's the same or less, they'll allow it. They didn't give me an extent of how often this does come up, but they just said it's quite frequent. And
Go ahead, Ron.
Hey, how are you?
yeah.
So my reading of the demolition piece, the second provision in the demolition part,
Yes.
where you can demolish the non-conforming structure, you can build a new non-conforming structure, and the 500 square feet just modifies the non-conformance, right?
Right.
So, not the whole structure. The structure could be like 6,000 square feet more, but it can also be 500 square feet more non-conforming. So, like, it's a setback issue in most counts, right? Most problems are setback problems.
Yeah.
So is what you're saying, as long as the setback, we had a 12-foot where we're supposed to have a 25. So as long as you're still at 12 feet, you can be 12 feet times 50 feet instead of 12 feet times the 10 feet you were before.
Are you doing 5 times 10 and getting 50?
Well, the numbers are immaterial. What I'm saying is...
Oh, you picked it perfectly, because that's what I thought you
Okay,
meant.
so then I did it well. So is that what we're talking about here? You can be as non-conforming as you were, but more space-wise. So I can't be 11 feet from the lot line. I have to be 12. But as long as I'm 12, I can go back to the woods and, down the hill, where currently I'm only 7 feet of my house is within that non-conforming lot line.
That's correct. That's
All
what
right.
that's saying. Yeah.
So my concern would be that this is going to encourage McMansions, because you'll get a lot of older houses that were built legally and then became non-conforming over time when we changed things. And right now, there's no reason to tear them down, because you can't build your big fancy house because, the lot line just screws you up. But now I can build my big fancy house because I'm really a 12-foot setback, where everyone else in the neighborhood is stuck with the 25 and is stuck there forever.
It is a special permit, so it's not by right, so you would have to get a special permit to do this.
Okay. Have we ever denied a special permit we haven't had this kind of
This
provision.
is through the ZBA, so it's a much higher lift to get that.
You were on the ZBA. You know whether you denied them or not, didn't you?
So, yeah, we put the no in Norfolk when I was on the ZBA, though. I mean, it's a different ZBA these days. And, technically speaking, permits are to be sparingly given, and there's like a 4-part test of why you're doing it. It has to be particular to the land and the soil conditions, blah, 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 which I can't see justifying a McMansion
Right.
as triggering any of those statutory, actually, they're not even statutory. I think, they are statutory, but there's also case law built. Anyway, all right.
Anyone else? Chad, would you mind asking Bob or the ZBA what a deal flow might be on an annual basis?
Yeah.
Just to get, it doesn't have to be, I don't need to know how many they did last year versus the year before, but if they tell me they did 20 last year and I find out they did 2, I'm gonna, so.
Yep, will do. Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate that, thank you.
Yep.
And then number 20 listed with us is Article 21.
So, yep, your Article 21, my 20, has to do with the accessory buildings, and it's removing the principal building, doing a strike through on that, and then adding in language to help. So, remove principal building, and then it's the new language is a reduction in the front, side, or rear yard requirement may be allowed by a dimensional special permit in R1, 2, and 3 for an accessory building, with due consideration being given to consistency between the existing character, the development pattern of the neighborhood, and it's a ZBA is the granting authority for that. So again, it's not by right, it's special permit from ZBA. This was another one where the principal building it was, again, a request from them that, hey, we're running into this a lot. This is how we want it reworded. Now, there has been some communication with Jay that he reviewed this language and thought it could be enhanced or streamlined a little, so I'm waiting to get that back from him. The intent would be the same, it's just he wanted to clean up the language a little bit. So I'm waiting to get that and then run it by town council, just make sure they're okay with it. Again, this public hearing is still open.
Yep.
We did open it 2 weeks ago, and we'll close it at the next planning board meeting in 2 weeks. So hoping to get all that language from Jay, or the language adjustments from Jay here this week.
Okay, so I traded emails with Rich about that, and we're meeting 2 weeks from now, which is the 14th? No, wait, what is it? 11th, see? I can't do math. And you guys would be able to come back to us on the 18th.
Yes.
17th,
17th.
which is also, there's
It's voting.
the Freeman Kennedy public forum about that night too, so I don't know if that impacts anything, but I know that week was already hard to schedule, and that's why it's on the 17th in the first place.
And sorry, Chad, I don't mean to make you wait, but I was trying to get some timing on it. And our warrant, our article write-ups are due,
I have to get everything to the printer on the 24th.
so we'd have to have votes that week.
Weekend, yeah.
Right. And why can't we do the 18th?
Nobody was available.
Okay, thank
People
you.
had
I get it.
scheduling
All right, thank
conflicts.
you. All right, yep. So on the 17th is the Tri-County Open Forum, or the votes on the 17th?
Oh, the 17th is the Freeman Kennedy expansion.
Freeman
We're doing a
Kennedy.
Community event, I believe.
Okay.
We're voting on the 17th.
We, the committee?
Yeah.
I thought you meant the Tri-County
Oh, no.
vote. Sorry, I got my voting mixed up. Yeah, so we would have them go first, and that would be one of the things we'd have to vote on, if we haven't already. I'm hoping to deal with some of these warrant articles as we go along, rather than wait until the last night if they're boilerplate. All right, so we're going to have to talk to someone on the 17th,
Yes.
and hopefully it'll be quick. But it won't. But yes, Mike.
I just have a question on this article. Could you give me a scenario of what, how this would impact? I mean, what's a typical scenario for this accessory building thing? What is somebody trying to do typically?
So, let's just say you have a home with maybe you have multiple sheds, or maybe you have a detached garage and a shed. That's kind of the best scenario I can think of, is that if you have multiple buildings, like in a side yard where you have a house, and then say a detached garage, and then you have a shed.
Okay.
There's been, from what we understand, that's been
Or a barn or something like that, right? Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Well, couldn't I, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman?
please.
So Chad, I mean, I could come in and say, look, you guys changed my front yard, so now my side yard's a front yard at the last town meeting. Can I put my shed in what is, you think a front yard, but I think it's a side yard, and there's fences, so it really doesn't, I read this as saying I can go in and say it's consistent with the existing character and development pattern, and, it won't be detrimental. So I can do this now.
Not by right, by
No,
special
I can do it
permit.
with a permit.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That helps.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
I have one procedural question. It seems like most of this is just saying you can get a special permit to do this. Are you unable to get a special permit for for variance to any bylaw unless that bylaw says you can get a special permit for that? Or is this just saying the thing that is part of how it works?
I think the bylaw has to allow for special permits or site plans or whatever it might be. If it says no, then no is no.
Well, you said two different things, Brian.
Okay.
There are variances and there are special permits. Special permits are given when you say, I can give you a special permit.
Yeah.
Variances are given when I just can't meet these things. Chad, am I remembering this correctly?
That's my understanding as well, yes.
And variance is a huge threshold. A special permit is like, it's not detrimental to the safety of the...
And variances are not going to be used for accessory buildings.
That's what is supposed to be sparingly given.
Okay.
So the McMansion thing...
Variances are huge, high lift, high level, sparingly given, like you said. Special permit should still have some, they're not as sparing as a variance,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's...
Variances is if you have a non-conforming lot and it's your only lot and you have to be able to build we have to allow you to build something on it. We can't make you build a shack that's, just because it fits inside our setbacks. We have to allow some variances. That would be an example.
Okay. Although that probably wouldn't be given because, hey, dude, you don't have a right to build a house on every piece of property in the world.
But that was super helpful. I appreciate it.
Yep.
That's right. We do have several lots in town that don't. They're basically unbuildable.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you, Chad. And
You are welcome. I will. I'll work on getting the language corrected here on your Article 21. Get that updated over to you, and then we'll get on the schedule for your advisory meeting. It's the 17th, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Can you
Great.
also,
Thank you.
there's going to have to be a discussion about that article that is your responsibility, but doesn't seem to be on your radar screen.
Yep.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great, thank you.
Yep.
Justin, you said you could run through some of the kind of boilerplate first few, and then we can
Yep.
talk about the treasurer's, the stuff with the stabilization funds and things like that.
Sure. So going that, I guess, in that direction, Mr. Chairman, the prior year unpaid bills, we don't have any unpaid bills at this moment. So, and hopefully we don't have any up to town meeting. So if the advisory board wanted to vote on that, you could vote on that or
Okay.
and then reopen it later if it changed, but we don't think that will. We started capital meetings with departments this week. We've met with all departments. Today was our last meeting. So we are going to then now work on budget transfers. We have a couple of transfers that we're exploring doing. We also typically do transfers to like stabilization funds and things like that. So in the next couple of weeks, we should have a list prepared for you guys to have for consideration for budget transfers.
Great.
So that's probably something we'll have to come back for.
Yep.
Capital expenditures from borrowing. Last time I met with you all, I said we probably wouldn't have anything for that. Met with our DPW director, and we may have some water debt to consider. So I'd probably hold off on that until we sort of come up with a plan there. And then,
Is that connected to the main failure that happened? That we had a potential
yes,
meeting?
yes, yeah. Along with something else, maybe water meter replacement, et cetera. But yes, it is associated with that.
Okay.
Good memory. Yeah. And then obviously for the capital expenditures other than from borrowing, that's generally free cash. And so we will have a list for you all soon enough there. Let me skip over the Freeman Kennedy sort of things there. Although I've had so many variations of this warrant, we obviously, there was adjustments. I don't remember the last time I met with you if there was established the school, the building committee. Was that on that one?
No.
It wasn't. So that was an addition. We have to, based on general bylaw, establish a building committee. So obviously, if town meeting votes to proceed with funding the schematic design, then we would establish a school building committee for that. The language for number 5 was also updated. It's similar to the language that we had for our fire station, that obviously is contingent based upon, voters doing, authorizing a debt exclusion, essentially. So you'll speak with Ingrid about that, but I'm just giving you a general heads up that language did change a little bit.
Who appoints the building committee? And who gets, like, is there qualifications for who's on it and things like that?
Yeah, I think there's part of a discussion that we have with select board and school committee. The appointment of committees have been interesting. It depends on the scenario. I think that's something that the select board and the school committee should probably talk about. But generally speaking, like the fire station, they wanted a diverse group of experts. We had engineers, architects, and so forth. Typically on a building project, you want to have that diverse group as well. So I anticipate that would be the case, but I don't want to say specifically what school committee or select board might decide there.
All righty.
I'll skip over the CPC articles. Right? I think
Do you have any committee reports that you're aware of yet? Just curious.
Fire station. Fire station always gives
All right,
a
yep.
update there.
Tell people to drive by on the way to the meeting.
The plug, in October, we're going to have a fire station open house as well, so you can go see some of that there. Although, and when you invite Cindy and whoever else there for the community preservation, article number 12, you'll remember there's a highlight there. There's no figure. I think Rich did get a figure, and now they're just communicating with CPC on where they want to be. But I'm anticipating that's going to be around $150,000.
Okay.
But nothing in there just exactly yet. CPC has to decide on that. Okay. Article 13. So when we talked about this, it had just really gotten to me that week. Did a little more investigation here. So obviously there was a change in the 2023 legislation regarding trust funds. So trust funds, then when we talk about trust funds, we're talking really like scholarship funds, cemetery funds. So what has typically been the case, those funds have been segmented and they've had a limited pool that you can invest in. So there's specific things you could invest in, and it's pretty limited versus, general funds, stabilization funds, different things like that. You have a whole assortment of different investment things that you can do. And generally, your financial advisor, depending on the town's desire to be conservative or more aggressive, you can optimize returns in that sense. Typically, trust funds have had lower returns than compared to your general operating stabilization funds. So this was a change that was advocated by the Massachusetts Collectors and Treasurers Association. It did pass. It's just allowing us to sort of invest those funds similarly to stabilization, general operating funds. There would be no significant change there. It would just be our financial advisor would advise on how to pool those funds and get better returns. So, as I said, the Massachusetts Collectors and Treasurers Association advocated for it, and they are encouraging communities to adopt it.
All righty. And, okay. Has anyone got any questions on that? Mike?
So a vote yes basically allows the town to be able to invest the money differently.
Yeah.
And a vote no would be, we just
Status
like the
quo.
way it is, and we're not going to adopt that aspect of it.
Correct. It's a local adoption.
So what governs the limitations then, if it, is there?
State law.
But the new state law is this, what is it? Is there some bylaw or something that says how it is
I'm sorry.
invested
Yeah,
now?
I understand.
You see what I mean?
I misunderstood
Yeah.
your question.
We don't accept it.
If we
I
don't
know
accept
what
it,
governs.
what's our rule? Are our rules gone because this law passed?
No, it would just adhere to this, if you don't adopt this, it would remain the status quo. So what the Mass General law previously prescribed was our trust funds could only be utilized in this sort of bucket of funds, et cetera. But if you adopt this legislation, you can utilize the prudent investor rule and pool that with like stabilization funds, sort of things like that. Did I answer your question? Or did that get it a little?
No, yeah, and basically, yeah. I assume, well, I kind of assume it will pass, but I just was wondering what the alternate scenario was. But
And most of the times with these things, like your financial advisors really advising your treasurer collector on how to invest your funds. So they would know, let's say if we adopted this, our treasurer collector would notify our financial advisor and say, all right, we can do this. If we didn't adopt it, there wouldn't be any change to how we're investing it.
There's no reason we can't adopt this tonight then if we chose to, right?
No.
Okay. Or vote on
I'll
it.
also speak with Anne Marie, who's our treasurer collector in the future if you want to.
Well, we can talk about that too. I mean, I was going to ask, actually, I'm just stopping myself from voting on this. Can you tell me how many funds we would have that would be impacted by this? Are you able to tell me tonight, or should I wait for that?
I wouldn't answer that because maybe I'm missing something. I would ask Anne Marie.
Someone's going to ask, and so I'm asking.
I mean, so, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I mean, this is actually allows less prudent investing, let's be honest, right? The base
Right.
statute is very prescriptive and says you can't have more than 15% and this kind of thing and, 20% over here, and please don't put it in more than X amount of stock,
No lottery tickets.
No lottery tickets. The Prudent Investor Act would ironically allow for slightly more exciting investment, right? But that has...
But exciting investment.
Well, it says prudent, right? It's kind of it's obvious when you say, you should be prudent that there's
Right.
a reason to think they might not be, it's not prudent, right? You don't have to call it out if you are actually prudent. So, why? We're talking about these little trust funds of 10, 12, 50. We're not going to go out there and make $100,000 off
That's
of it.
true.
And you could end up with less.
I think
Why
that's
do it?
one of the reasons we should find out what we've actually got. Maybe there is some weird trust fund sitting out there that they could make, but I don't know. I mean, and maybe we should hear from Anne Marie then at some point,
And why would the treasurer collectors push this?
because they're the ones responsible for.
Exactly. I'm responsible for managing it. I don't want anything that sniffs of anything beyond, give me 2.5% bank interest, please. Because I'm going to lose money and my bosses are going to get ticked.
The reason why is actually, I think, it also depends what kind of group do you have active with these trust funds. There's some that are very passive. They just get the report and they don't ever ask, or they don't compare to what the town is doing. There have been a lot of trust funds. The returns in the past few years have been pretty impressive in terms of for communities up until I say in the past year and a half. So the returns have been they've been higher on stabilization funds and different things like that, because you can be a little more aggressive in equities and different things like that. And so some of the trust funds, when they've seen this and say, well, why am I earning 2% versus, all right, the town the past X amount of years has had 13%. So they're looking at ways to maximize their funds. I agree. You could have a not so rosy return as well, and you have the safety of just investing or a nice savings account and so forth, and getting your X amount of interest, and the interest rates have gone higher this year. So it really depends, and I think that's part of a conversation. This gives you the flexibility, right? If you have a cemetery fund or a scholarship funds that are very active, like, we want to try to maximize our funds, and you can go invest it similar to how the town invests in other funds. You can do that, and if they don't want to do that, you can make that decision as well. It really depends. I have a good example of this too. Cambridge, we know Cambridge is sort of flush with a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. They're very conservative about investing their funds. They have some of the lower returns, surprising, because they want to get a X percentage. We're guaranteed to get it. It's not going to hurt us. We don't want to risk. We want to say, hey, we lost money or returns. Brookline, another community I was at, we were more aggressive than Cambridge. We wanted to maximize our funds, so we invested aggressively. So it really is dependent on the community and on who you're servicing.
Yes, John.
Sorry if I'm getting too far off topic. Please stop me. But just based on what you were just saying, can I ask, I don't recall ever seeing this, what percentage of our annual operating budget is dependent on interest? Do we, right? Because I have no idea. I mean, it's more of a curiosity, but it's the sort of thing where if we are dependent on either X percent or a hard dollar amount to be earned in interest, I would be really curious to know that as it relates to conservative versus aggressive investing and the risk, and not so much of the, hey, can we close gaps if we get more interest, but more on the flip side of that, which is if we start trying to be more aggressive and get poor returns, what knockdown effect is that going to have on taxes ultimately to fill, or overrides to start filling gaps if we're not meeting some expected amount of revenues coming from an interest
That's
each year?
a very good question. We can give you that pretty quickly because there's a line item for investment income in our budgets.
Yeah.
And it's not a large part of our budget. I don't know what the figure is off the top of my head, but generally when we do budgets, we sort of adopt a conservative approach to budgeting. So we've generally had whatever the amount may be, and it's not a big amount. I remember discussing this with Todd. So you'll have, let's say, $50,000, right? That's our budgeted figure that we have. Over the last year and a year and a half, because the interest rates have been so, they've ticked up. We've had a higher performance on interest rates, but we would never budget more than what we've seen. It's just forecasting, essentially. We'll give you the figure, though, just so you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But this article deals with trust funds that aren't budgetary related.
Correct.
They don't, this would impact.
I know, that's why I was saying I didn't want to go
Okay.
too far afield, but it was just more of an adjacent
Yeah.
type of question. So, but
It's a good
thank you.
question. I'll
Understood.
give you that figure.
Quick question.
Yes.
So what, my only question is, what controls are there on this in terms of the treasurer? If the treasurer says, well, hey, we've got these $300,000 in trusts out there, we want to invest it all in some AI stock because our financial advisor said to, right? Where's the ultimate, does it come from you, does it come from the board, select board? Who gives the treasurer, does the treasurer have the total green light to follow the advisor's advice if we allow them to adopt this?
I would, that's a good question as well. I would amend and say, even though we're giving more latitude to invest funds, I would say there's a sandbox in how you can invest funds still. There's mass general law that says, hey, you can only invest in these sort of funds. You can't invest here and so forth. It really depends on the community. Some communities have adopted investment policies because some want to be even more explicit about we're not going to invest in fossil fuels even though you can't do it, or different things like that. I think I would have Anne Marie fall on that. I don't know that we have an investment policy that guides us on that one. But our financial advisors have to adhere to Mass General law regarding investment policies overall for Mass General law. So it's not like we can invest 90% in equities or so. There's a limit to what we can do there.
But you could, I guess to follow up on Ken's, but if she has those rules,
Yep.
she doesn't then have to say, hey, Justin, or hey, select board, I'd like to present our portfolio, our proposed portfolio for the year.
No.
Okay, so she's on her own, essentially, bounded by general laws.
Right, so this expands what the treasurer is potentially able to invest in without any oversight above her level.
For trust funds, yes.
Trust funds.
And getting I think people will be surprised. We're talking a small amount of money
It's
here.
a small amount, very small amount.
Can you either have Anne Marie get us something or ask if she wants to
Yeah,
appear
I
before
think
us?
I would probably, Erica, if we could combine, if you have the minutes of some of the questions, I'll make sure I have them and we'll send over Anne Marie and we could just get some responses for her.
So one question, if it is a small amount, section 54 does say there's a minimum of $250,000 that needs to be there, so it's above that, but below,
It could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
because if it's below 250, it doesn't really matter anyway.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. There
And
we-
actually, tell me one more.
Yeah, sure.
So this goes back to, we were talking before the meeting casually about the opioid trust. So that's a trust that's going to be created with a substantial amount of money coming in. So that would be potentially one that you're looking at
You're
40,
talking about
50, 60.
you're talking about the opioid abatement funds?
Right. And so then we create a trust, so that's just another potential thing to be invested. And there's a sizable amount of money coming
Yeah.
through that, so.
I would
it's-
imagine we would do the same we probably do it really depends on how you want to optimize returns. Do you want to group them in with your stabilization funds to maximize? I mean, you're not going to, I won't say you're going to lose money on it. If you're asking, all right, your opioid abatement funds, are we going to be aggressive with that, or do we want to keep it, flat savings rate? It really depends what it is. I don't know. I haven't spoke with Anne Marie there. We haven't even created yet.
Yeah, no, I'm just wanted to point out that it's not, the talk about, it's just, it could be just a small cemetery trust but the opioid's going to be a sizable amount of money.
It's a stabilization fund.
Yeah.
You can invest it as we
It's
invest
not
stabilization
bound by
fund now.
the change that we're talking
Yeah,
about.
it's not a trust
Oh,
fund.
that's,
Exactly. It's not
even
a
if we
trust.
create a trust for it, isn't that?
It's a stabilization fund, not a trust fund,
Stabilization.
yeah.
Yeah.
I figured that out.
That's good.
So, speaking of debt stabilization funds,
Yes.
the next, if no one has any more questions on that, the next article is the creation of a debt stabilization fund.
So I gave a preview of this one, but there was another adjustment. We added a proposed debt stabilization fund, sort of tied with the Tri-County High School. I'll talk about just debt stabilization fund just overall. I spoke about this at our last
Yep.
meeting, but the intent is to establish a stabilization fund specifically for capital equipment or capital projects. Fire chief knows very well, we've got some planning to do with, in terms of a lot of different projects, but we're considering, might need a new engine or ladder. And these things are pretty expensive items. There was a quote on a Quint around $1.7 million. And that is pretty much all our free cash that we allocate to capital. So to be strategic about some things is to be able, if in great times, we could sock some money away to this debt stabilization fund to offset some larger capital purchases. So that's the intent of that article. Article number,
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
And the way that we would feed money into it is an annual appropriation of some sort?
Yes.
And that would be based on excess free cash, or?
correct. Just
You
like
could
how-
could you do an override?
You could do that as well.
Yeah.
Some communities, what they've done is they've authorized an override, and they say, well, we're specifically going to use this money for that purpose. It's kind of like what we're doing with the opioid stabilization fund. They allocate it to that stabilization fund, and you can only use it for that
That's my
purpose.
follow-up question is if we did something like that and if we didn't do an override, but we knew we had a truck coming up 3 years from now and we started putting money in it, and 2 years from now, the boiler blows up at Freeman Kennedy. There's nothing, is there a way to put a provision on the funds that are appropriated or not? Probably not in this, right? Do you know what I'm saying? So we have a sudden emergency that supersedes our ability or our interest in buying a truck next year, so we're going to spend it to replace the boiler.
Actually, yeah, no, I understand the genesis of the question. Actually, that is why we have that other article for the Tri-County.
Right.
Because
So avoid-
technically, the way we've worded this article is to allow for broad flexibility. It says capital equipment and/or capital projects,
Right.
because we're thinking, you never know what might happen. There might be something emergency that you really need to be flexible on. If you were to create a stabilization fund and specifically said, hey, this only goes for X, you can only use it for X. In this manner, the mechanism to make sure that these funds are utilized in a manner that the town wants is that you have to have 2/3 approval from town meeting to release the funds from the stabilization fund.
That's a good question.
So that's your mechanism to control it and make sure you're doing that perfectly.
Yes, Rob.
So you will recall when you and I went
Roads?
new to town. Yeah, the road override,
Mike remembers that too because he lived on one of those roads. But
which was for roads for about a year
in an
and a half.
override for roads, they spent
was
the money
longer
the
than
first year on roads and then went into the general fund, and it became,
If it was
a
an
real.
override, then if you set the roads.
Well, but the law is, you can't bind, it was an override, you can't
If
bind
you
the
create a debt
future.
stabilization fund for the Tri-Val, or Tri-County, then.
Yeah,
right,
that you
right.
can
Okay. Yeah.
bind.
Okay.
But the override just becomes general.
Yes, an override just becomes general road. Oh, see, yeah, if you specifically said override's tied to this project and a stabilization fund, it locks it. But if you do an override that's just a general fund, you can do whatever you want with it technically.
That's why we don't have a language program in our elementary schools anymore. Because we did an override one year and lasted 2 years.
One question, is this could be good for predictability in general, but I would love it to be tied to the budgetary process being we allocate so much to capital projects as opposed to doing departmental capital reviews and just saying we don't actually, what's allocated to capital is what you have to spend through. And talking about specific cop cars and things now would be, we've already made that decision and now it's up to the town to say, what do we want to bring to the town to release from that stabilization fund? So like, my point being, we fluctuate that a lot and everything is an emergency this year. But if we say we're putting this much into capital, now the town understands how to prioritize across multiple years because that stabilization fund is no longer a one-year capital budget.
You're talking a CIP. We need a capital investment plan that's a
Yes.
multi-year plan. That,
Yes.
we're going to do 2 cops cars this year, 2 cop cars this year. We're going to do.
And how,
Our department heads do that? Do the,
well,
We're
they-
speaking our language. We've been talking about this. We have, I would say our capital CIP is a process. The former town administrator, they did create a CIP book, right? And they did generally have those projects, but I still think we're working with department heads to say, hey, for example, we're talking with department heads and they would say, all right, well, we want this amount for vehicles and it's just one amount for fiscal year '24. And I'm like, well, we have a fleet maintenance thing. I know we've got X amount of vehicles. We've got 40% of our vehicles that are over $100,000. So I know 100,000 miles. I know that we're probably going to need a replacement in 25 or 26 or 27. So what we're doing is we're working collaboratively to put those numbers in and have a more holistic CIP moving forward. So what we'll do moving forward is we're going to release a CIP book that has all the requests of departments, and it's going to be an actual 5-year CIP. And then in that same book, we're going to say, hey, this is funded. So you know what was funded, you see all the requests. So even though it may not have been able to be funded, well, these are still things that are on the horizon. Our department heads did ask.
and that will include not just the things we want, but also things like what happens when our boiler explodes, because no one puts a boiler on their plan too often, or
They
heat
usually
heat
don't.
pump. Right, that's what I mean.
Well, because they're 20-year.
That's what,
We do
I
two
think-
things there.
right.
I don't want to interrupt you, but we do two things there.
Yeah.
Because for example, we know that some of our boilers need to be replaced. There are some that are 33 years, right? So we're putting that in the CIP. Our new facilities director has that on a CIP for whatever year it may be. But we also have to plan for those unforeseen things. So we do have money in operating budgets for those unforeseen emergency expenses. So we do it two ways, right? We hope that we can get there to fiscal year 25 to replace that boiler or generator. But if we don't, we have operating budget funds
Yep.
that we can utilize.
And then
some
if
of
that
these
wasn't,
resources.
if the accident didn't happen that year, is that cash allocated to the capital stabilization fund because that emergency didn't happen that year, or is it spent on something else?
Technically,
Yeah.
because we fund capital from
Yeah.
free cash.
Yeah.
Yes, but not technically. It would fall to free cash.
Becomes free
If we
cash.
had, we had $35,000, let's say we had a budget of $50,000 for unforeseen expenses and we had only $15,000, $35,000 ultimately would fall to free cash. So it would go to capital if we wanted to.
I want to ask, but also maybe explain a clarifying thing, I think. If we create this, we'll continue to have a free cash line item, or a free cash article on the thing. All of the debt will not start coming out of this.
Correct.
This will be, all right, you understood that part. I was
Yes.
confused by your question, so.
No, but
Okay.
but it gets to the CIP is
Right,
actually what I'm
right.
saying, that
Okay.
we can
could
plan
throw
for that.
free cash into this
Right.
Right,
1 year. Yay.
yeah.
Bam.
Okay, yeah, all right, I just wanted to make sure that we were thinking.
That's
the
an
same
important
thing.
part. Yeah,
okay.
no, we would still intend to have our typical CIP.
And
allocated
overrides are
free
obviously,
cash.
borrowing is a whole separate thing, but.
Well, that's the Tri-County question, right? That it relates to borrowing. Can I ask another?
Yes.
Have we certified free cash yet?
No. You can't ask Todd just yet. He's working on it. It's close.
Don't talk to him about it.
Leave him alone, all right?
why
He's
he's not
hard at
here.
work. He's hard at work.
He's upstairs
He's
burning
hard at
midnight
work.
oil.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any more questions on the general debt stabilization fund? Okay. Article 15 is the Tri-County High School
So the reason why this article is probably being considered is as probably the advisory committees where October 24th, there's a vote regarding the Tri-County school program. I met this morning with town administrators and Karen, who's a superintendent. And so I believe we're all aware of the nuances of that vote. You know, it just needs a majority vote, and if you have a majority vote, it's part of the town's assessment. And there's a variable.
A majority vote amongst all of the towns that are part of it.
Correct.
And if one town votes 90%, all the other towns vote 48%, and it still pushes to 51, that's it.
As long as it's 50 plus one in approval, yeah.
Right.
You could have, in theory, let's say you had 10 communities who voted no, but if the one community did to like, it had massive turnout, it would pass. And so the nuance with that, with the way the language is, it's not associated with a debt exclusion vote, right? So if this project passes, you've got an estimate of about $200 million borrowed, and it's based on your assessment. And your assessment is based on enrollment, right? And so that means it's variable. Every year, it depends on how many students go to school. So I think what the intent would be, there actually is one community that's scheduled a debt exclusion vote at the same time. Millis is doing it at the same time. But most of the communities are going to wait until after this vote occurs to see what happens. And more than likely, for communities that are really impacted, like Norfolk, for our estimate is about $520,000. We can't fund that within the levy. So the intent would be to, have a debt exclusion vote for that. And as we all know, debt exclusion votes can fail. So I think part of that intent is, one, we have to be very inform the community about the impact of this, but also to protect us a little bit in case a debt exclusion does fail and this project does pass, consider and establish this stabilization fund to be able to allocate funds to it. Because, if we had to fund, $520,000 within our operating budget, you all are aware of how tough our last budget was.
Yeah.
That would be a significant impact. That would cost us to reduce positions, make difficult decisions. So this is to try and protect us in case that does happen.
If the vote goes positively in October, is there a sense of when the first assessment would be directed at
We
all
talked about that this morning. They're still working on this. Their financial advisors consider having them do bands for a couple of years. It'd probably be fiscal year 25, some construction work, 26 probably where we see the impact on our assessment. But that's still in flux. That is not hard rule. They're talking very.
But it's not like next July 1st, we're going to get a bill or something like that, okay?
Correct. Not for this project.
Right. Yes, Rob. Oh, actually, Mike.
Well, no, he was,
So
he'll probably ask my question.
am I remembering something along the lines of one of the reasons to do this kind of a thing is because the assessment will vary?
Yes.
All right, so we can't just go for a debt exclusion and say, we'll pay you $522K a year. We'll go for a debt exclusion for a big amount of money. We'll put it in this thing, and this year it's 522, next year it's 7. Oops, we got to come up with some extra money. Right? Is that the?
So we would craft it. So what some communities have made the mistake about doing is they put a figure associated with it. And when you put a figure, that's what you're locked to. You would craft the language to say it'd be for any and all costs associated with the Tri-County project. So, in theory, let's say the estimate is 520. All right, so if the 1 year is 520, you could do the 520, but let's say the next year it's 300,000. You would probably only just do up to the 300,000. Versus if it went up, it gives you the
The
flexibility
debt
to go up and
exclusion
down.
changes every year?
You could, you
So
could
Rob,
do
it's a
tax
$200 million
exempt.
project. They're going to borrow $200 million, and every year we're going to get a bill for our share of the interest payments and capital and principal payments
That I
on
get.
that.
What I don't get is going to the town saying, vote for a debt exclusion that may be 520 this year, maybe 700 the next, maybe 200.
That's why there's a
Enrollment-based,
lot
right?
of, there's a lot of information regarding that. And
All
so-
enrollment based.
No, but how do you put that in a ballot? How do I vote for that?
Right.
As a voter, how do I?
I know how I vote for it.
No, how do I? If I'm if I'm thinking about this beyond just, yes, I don't want to pay it, no, I don't want to pay any more money, or yes, I'm paying whatever, I don't care what it is. If I actually sit there and think, okay, I can afford this at $520,000 a year because I know what my portion of the levy is, right? Because that's how they always sell you an override. They say it's going to cost you $68 a month. Okay, I can vote for that. How can I vote for this when it says, well, it could be 60 this year, but next year it's going to be 100, and then the year after that, oh, it may be 42.
This is why there's been
I can't believe that's legal.
It's legal, and it's, to be honest with you, regarding whether it's, I'm spending X amount of, do I want to support the project or not, the right thing to do is to associate that way rather than having a figure. Because if you did, let's say the figure jumped exponentially higher than what you estimated, and you had a figure there,
Yeah.
you got to fund it
You have to go
within
for
the
a
levy,
second
right?
vote,
Or go for another vote. But this is why there's so much advocacy at the moment at the legislature to try and get some assistance with vocational schools. We were talking about this morning as well, because this is very tricky, because you really can't do any planning for it. It is variable. So, like any new schools, right? Sometimes when you have new schools, more parents want to send their kids to the new school, so you could have even more students go to the school. You don't know, and that's the difficulty. That's the difficult thing with this project.
Go ahead.
October 3rd, the superintendent, along with their business manager, is coming to the select board to talk about the project. We're going to really try to, get that information out. I encourage people to attend that meeting. If there's any questions they have, they're more than willing to talk about the project. I think it's important for people to know about it.
Absolutely.
And ask questions.
This is a hypothetical, kind of. Is the variability in what our interest or what our obligation payments, might be year to year really any different than if KP were to build a new building? Because we get an assessment from KP based on enrollment year to year. Is this really any different than what we?
But the debt would be the same amount with KP every year, right? I mean, it would, see, this has to not be governed by like a regional agreement, but by state law or something.
I was just trying to understand why this example would be different from what we face as a regional school with KP, because our assessment and our contribution changes each year.
Right, but
That's KP.
But that's not a debt
building a building,
exclusion.
that's different.
When we built the building, we knew how much it was.
Right, and it stayed the same and it tapered off, right?
Yeah.
But
But I think Mike's, or Jonathan's question is that, yes, but, I don't know how much, it was $100 million. And they built a building for, borrowed $100 million.
did we just split it 33% across each towns, or was it based on the population at that point in time?
Yeah, I assume it was like.
Because
whatever they-
either way, it would be inequitable at some point in the future. Some towns' population would change, their enrollment would change. It just seems like that approach, while solving the problem of not knowing what you may be paying next year, creates a different problem of you may know exactly what you're paying year to year, and it may be way too much based on your assessment versus the next town's assessment.
Yes, your
That-
town shrinks over 10 years, another
Right.
town grows or something.
That's a great point, and it depends on how it's structured, right? Some communities, in that case, who have regional agreements, they come up with a formula beforehand and say, hey, all right, this is what it looks like now, so you're 3 towns. You do 35%, the other town does 25%, and the other town does whatever it is. And it's structured that way in perpetuity. There are some that do it based on the assessment where they allow that flexibility. And then some, just, like I said, that first scenario is saying, they structure it and say, hey, we're going to do this over 30 years or however long they do the borrowing for, and that's what you're going to be required for.
Not that Todd doesn't have anything to do, but could you ask someone to tell us how the last KP building was built?
Yep.
Was it option A or option B, or was there a
Yep.
third option that we're not talking about here? So,
It was
Thank
before
you.
my time, yeah.
what?
It was before my time.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about options, are we hearing any options, or is it we either get the same old Tri-County or a $200 million high school? Feels like there's a lot of trade space between nothing and $200 million that hasn't been communicated.
I think that's something that a lot of people say it's been tough communication. I would just say I would probably want Karen to answer that.
Yeah.
I mean, they did a lot of exploration. When they initially looked at this project, they initially looked at replacing the existing building. But there's a lot of things that go, and there's a lot of things that go into it. There's a lot of ADA and code issues in terms of replacing the building. So in the end, when they did their evaluation of it, it was just cost prohibitive to replace it. It was cheaper based on the scenarios that they did to build a new school. So though they looked at a variety of options, but I probably want Karen to answer your question a little bit more.
I gotta imagine fitting out a school like that is a lot more expensive than fitting out even a regular high school in terms of equipment.
I mean, I imagine that equipping is a small part of the overall construction costs. Not a small part. It's not.
There's a large culinary arts program there, for instance, that's gonna be an expensive.
And they're doing fields and, there's.
Doing fields.
One thing that I think we've all seen, like MSBA, they've sort of been funding more. They've been encouraging people to build new because, when you build new, the biggest cost or the unknown is in the ground, right? Once you get past that period, you shouldn't have any issues. When you're renovating buildings, it's not in the ground, it's as you're building it, and you'll find things as you jackhammering in or getting a wall, so it becomes exponentially more expensive that route. So that's why they're encouraging people to go the build new route.
You just reminded me of a question I was going to ask. Is this an SBA approved project?
MSBA approved, yes.
Okay, good.
So they do have a website, Brian,
That you can
Yes.
get to from the clerk's office, which has videos of old presentations.
So this article itself, so how do we see this working like year to year? We're going to be putting money into it, again, just from free cash, and maybe we'll have a year or two to prime the pump, or is that,
That's a good question. I think there's a conversation, with the select board, with advisory, and how they would want to see this done. I think if you're asked what my advice would be, would I say, all right, create the stabilization fund, see how the vote, we're going to see how the vote goes October 24th. So if it's a no vote, then it's kind of a moot point on this, right? If it's a yes vote, I think something then we have to communicate, this is the impact on us if we fund this within the levy. I would recommend probably that we do a debt exclusion. So the next step I would probably suggest is have a debt exclusion vote before you allocate any funding to this. Because if you pass the debt exclusion vote, this is kind of a moot point already there, so you wouldn't even worry about it. If you don't pass the debt exclusion vote, that's when you start incorporating this. All right, maybe we should sock some money away in this at annual town meeting or a fall town meeting, like when we typically do, stabilization funds, capital projects. So that's probably the order of process.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions on this one? And the last one is the opioid abatement stabilization fund, which
Yeah.
I think we're all fairly familiar with, including our new member. This is simply the same. This is the same language that was. Did we adopt this and then put it on hold because of what was? No, you guys pulled it. That's right. Yeah.
Yes, it's the same language. We thought there was going to be a special account passed in the municipal finance legislation. They didn't do it. And people want us to expend these funds.
Yeah.
And so we held the line, the select board made a decision we weren't going to expend any funds until we adopted, either that special account and so forth. But now there's a reporting requirement associated with it. The first report was due I think it is the 27th, to say, hey, how did you utilize these funds if you did utilize them? There's other communities that have already allocated funds to this. I think we don't want to wait on the state anymore. Let's create the stabilization fund, put the money in there, and allow us to start coming up with a process to release these funds for the purpose. So I also anticipate we're going to do this it's kind of like a two-step process. In the budget transfers article, I think we're going to allocate an amount from free cash for the purposes of an opioid, thing. There's, we've had, the select board has had requests to allocate some funds to different, groups or whatever. I think there might be a small amount that is transferred to allow for them to decide on how to do that, and then put the majority in the stabilization fund, and then come up with a overall process on how to expend those funds, if that makes sense.
And who's got the strings on the stabilization fund?
Town meeting would do that.
Okay.
So we would do the normal appropriating process going that route.
Is there an intention to develop a plan on an annual basis or something like that? So we'd have a,
That would be the purpose, yeah.
yeah, all right,
Intent.
okay. Jonathan?
May I just ask, do we have any idea of what we're expecting in terms of?
So far, we've received about $44,000 from what, it's like $43,689, I think that I got from Todd. I think Norfolk's, let me get back to you, I don't want to be too aggressive. I felt it was like six figures. I think we were supposed to get 115, but I don't know exactly. I can get back to you what
Okay.
the overall amount we expect it to be.
And is that given over a period of X number of years or
Yeah, it's
over
over a period-
20 years?
Yeah, it's over
So
a period of years.
40K received and then another 100, I know you didn't use that word, or another 60. Like, have we received 40% of what we're expecting to
Yeah.
get and the rest will be parceled out over
So
time?
The rest will be
Walmart,
parceled
Teva, Allergan, and CVS did a big dump
Right.
the first year,
Yep.
and then to the state, and then the state to all of us, and then some of the other pharmaceuticals are, Johnson & Johnson did a big dump. Some of them wanted to some of the big ones like Johnson & Johnson, Mike just paid it.
Yeah.
Well, we owe you $30 million, here it is. And then some of these smaller ones did smaller ones. I'm looking at where I work, and we're $819,000 over 20 years.
Right.
And some of it, there's big dumps up front. And then there's others that are $4,000 a year, 13 annual payments, $5,000 a year, 7 annual payments. It's all on the Attorney General's website.
Okay,
It's
I
all
guess
available.
maybe ultimately my question is, do we expect at some point to have some projection or forecast of what we can expect annually and for how long?
Yeah.
So from a planning perspective, right, in terms of we establish the fund, we put the 40K that's already in there, but in terms of if we're going to develop the plan of where do we spend it, how do we spend it, those sorts of things, I think if we have runway to understand how much more we can expect and over what period of time, we'll be in a much better position to make a plan, rather than, we've got 40 now, but we don't know what is coming at
Oh, it's all
what
spelled out.
point in the
That,
future.
that would be part of the process, because
It's all spelled out. The
it's all-
Attorney General has it's all broken out. I have the spreadsheets for Bellingham.
Sure, yeah,
Broken out, but it's there.
Right.
It's just a matter of, the problem is, the Attorney General put, I think it's 15 or 18 pharmaceuticals, so there's a spreadsheet for each one. Somebody's gonna take the time to mush them all together
Right.
and make one that makes sense for the individual community.
Yes, but there's all prescribed. Don't ask Todd just yet. Yeah, we're working on free cash first.
I've done my semi-annual Excel spreadsheet exercise, I could do it. Any more questions for Justin on this? Okay. I think we're all set with stuff from you. Take a temperature of the committee tonight. You want to vote on some things? I think we could probably vote on this one. I think we could vote on the first article. I'd like to hear some more from Anne Marie before we vote on the general debt, or the
Prudent investment
thing.
Well, do we want to wait on this one until after the October,
Which one?
no, wait a minute,
The Tri-County one?
Tri-County?
I was talking about the opioid one.
Oh,
yeah.
You're right, we moved on to opioid, I was just, forget it, I'm with you.
I don't think it's going to change. We're not going to,
I was talking about the wrong article, so we can
okay,
talk
no, I
about-
understand, but I mean, as Justin explained it, even after the vote. If it's a vote no,
Yep.
they're still going to have to do some sort of capital improvements to that school at some point. But we can wait.
No,
Although we are waiting until our last meeting if we do that.
If we vote for it now, and we vote yes or no, either way, and then this project doesn't pass the 11-town vote, does that not just get pulled off of our warrant?
You always have a meeting, but, you know,
It'll be on the
you
warrant.
would still be on the, it would be on the warrant.
Just voted
But we can vote to
But you always
IP it,
have a
I mean,
meeting before town meeting, you
That's
could
what I mean.
reconsider
Like,
it.
we still don't have to bring that to the floor. We can
Yeah.
just IP it and say this is no longer relevant.
We could do it in the meeting before the
Right.
town meeting.
Right, so I personally don't see any downside for us voting on this
Okay.
now. It's not a vote about the project or not a project, it's a vote on how will we
Mechanics.
manage the
Yeah.
payments, and all of it becomes moot if it doesn't pass anyway. I don't see any harm in voting for that one.
I think the opioid one's a good one to, that's an easy one. That
Yes.
They can't spend the money
We actually,
until,
we voted for it a year ago, and then they pulled it because.
can't spend the money
yeah.
until the money gets into the trust.
So, Article 1 is the unpaid bill one. I'll take a motion on, from a member of the committee on the
Promise you won't have it?
Article 1
Doing my
unpaid bills.
best.
So we're moving to indefinitely postpone, is that?
No, we're moving to indefinitely postpone.
Yes.
That's what.
I said no, didn't
How
I?
did I say that? Differently?
You didn't- No, you hesitated in the wrong place, Mike.
I guess someone else should make the motion, apparently, but.
No, Mike, go ahead. I
just did,
apologize.
yes, I moved
Okay,
to indefinitely postpone.
Second.
All in favor of indefinitely postponing Article 1?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The rest, I think we're all waiting on. We need to see the budget transfers.
Yep.
There's not going to, Article 4, there's not going to be a proposed borrowing.
No, number 3, it potentially could be. DPW
Oh, I
water.
mean, other than borrowing, never mind.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, never mind. So, all right, so we're skipping those.
Yeah.
And so we've got,
Do you want to assign recommendations while we vote?
anyone want to write the first one up? Article 1? It's an easy one. It's IPs. Rob volunteered, okay.
I'm gonna write it right now.
I'll explain that to you.
I'll email it to you tonight.
I'm trying to find where we left off here. Article 13. We're going to wait on the Prudent Investment Act till we get some information. The General Debt Stabilization Fund, is that something folks feel that we've got, and all we're going to get on? Does anyone want to hold on that one? No. Okay. Can I have a motion
I
on
move
Article
to-
14?
I move to approve Article 14 as written in the warrant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Article 15 is the Tri-County, I think I heard we're going to wait on that? No. No, you're right, you're right.
vote for it.
Okay.
No.
Can I get a motion on Article
I
15?
move to approve Article 15 as written in the warrant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Article 16, creation of an opioid abatement stabilization fund.
I move to approve it as written in the article.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great.
I could take those.
Okay, you want to do all of them?
There's a 3, I guess.
Okay, you want, okay.
Can we do 17 as well?
Wait a minute.
That's putting the money into the stabilization fund we just created.
Was that right?
Oh, how come we didn't talk about that?
Move to accept the paragraph.
I'm sorry.
I think that's just really procedural,
Yeah.
right? It's just,
Articles.
okay, we create the fund, okay, we put the money in the fund.
Okay.
Correct.
Great. Can I get a motion on Article 17?
I motion accepted as written.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. We have one more item.
Put that in that package then, right?
What do you
I'll
mean?
just write all of
Yeah, if you want. That's great. Thank you, Mike. We have one more item on our agenda, which is the adoption of minutes. Brian?
I sent the draft minutes from 9/12 around today for review. I reviewed them. There are no updates or corrections that were needed.
Okay.
I move that the minutes for September 12th be approved as distributed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Great. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
That way we go. Thank you. Thanks, Justin.
No problem. Good to see you all.